The thing that makes two horses look like a pair or a team is their proper alignment. There are only three dimensions to alignment: lateral, longitudinal, and vertical. In order to easily achieve proper alignment, Steve looks at each of these separately.
Now, old Stumpy, he fancies himself to be the fanciest feller in the whole ranch. You understand? Every time he harnesses up a team, why, he makes them look just so fancy. Matter of fact, one thing that he likes to use there is these spreaders back here. Yeah, one of those. Nice and pretty and so fancy. Bright, shiny things. See, he puts those on the lines. So he's got these nice spreaders up there looking beautiful. And boy, he drives around just as proud as an old peacock, just to drive around those big old spreaders up there looking good. Well, one time we was out in the field though, kind of interesting. We were haying. The whole crew was out there. It was Stumpy's job to bring the lunch out. And well, I was coming along about noontime, and we see old Stumpy a coming. And he comes out of the ranch yard there and headed out toward the field. Oh, such a sight you never saw. Oh, I mean, those horses was coming right at you, and the way their heads was turned out like that, and you could see those nice spreaders in there just a shining in the sunlight. Oh, such a sight. Oh, and old Stumpy, he was up there just as proud as it could be, and he figured, well, he's going to come out there just on the run. So he flogs those old horses up there, and he's coming riding out there just a squalling it was. Them horses with their heads was displayed out there just looking pretty in the sunlight it was. Well, now, in this field, there's only one post, and it's right next to the road. And old Stumpy, he come running by there. Now, those horses' heads was displayed out like that. And one of the lines was hanging down. And when he came past that post, that outside line caught on that post. Oh, such a sight you never saw. Well, when that line caught, that outside horse just wheeled right around. And the wagon just squealed right around after it and turned over, just whoop, 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 whoop. All the lunch and there's water and Stumpy rolling across. Oh, it was beautiful. I loved it. Oh, Stumpy, he does look pretty when he's rolling across the pasture, you understand? Yep.
Lateral alignment is the dimension of alignment which refers to how parallel the horses are to the tongue and their distance from the tongue. We define a laterally aligned pair of horses by the equation B equals C equals D. In other words, bit centers equals coupler snap centers, or neck yoke width, equals doubletree width. It is an ancient and true axiom of horse behavior that horses seek the center of the bit. It's easy enough to make the neck yoke and doubletree width the same. Purchase them that way. Where most people have trouble is adjusting the lines or reins so that the bit centers equal that width. Moving both stub lines an inch forward makes the spacing between the horses 2 inches wider at the bits. The opposite is also true. I adjusted the coupling lines on this team so that they are a little close together at the bits. To get them further apart, you need to move the coupling lines forward on the draft lines. You'll notice these lines, like most team lines made in America, are punched every 6 inches. With the typical lines shown here, by moving the coupling lines 6 inches forward or back on the draft lines, you get 12 inches of change at the bits. We like to have our lines punched every inch so that we can do finer width adjustments. Stumpy's use of spreaders already illustrated what can happen when they are used inappropriately. As you can see, the spreaders take some of the deflection out of the stub lines, making the bit centers too wide. Just like moving the stub line buckle forward on the draft line, each inch of spreader length will increase the spread between the bits by 1 inch. Since the spreaders are used symmetrically, 8-inch spreaders increase bit center width by 16 inches. It's not uncommon to see a pair of horses on a 42-inch neck yoke and doubletree with 58 inches of width at the bit because of inappropriate spreader use. If you want to get a good read on your line adjustments, it's best to unhitch your team and drive them on open ground. When there is no slack in the lines, you can see how wide apart the bits are set. If you are cultivating row crops where the horses need to walk a very wide spacing, then spreaders are the thing to use. These types of implements should have double trees and neck yokes to match the wide spacing at the bits. Longitudinal alignment is how the horses line up head to head, as best seen from above. We say that a pair of horses has good longitudinal alignment when the double tree and neck yoke are perpendicular to the tongue and when both horses have equal pressure on the bit. You can purchase and adjust your way to lateral alignment. Achieving longitudinal alignment relies more on the awareness and skill of the driver. According to Teamster math, 1 + 1 = 1. To have a couple horses look like a team or a pair, the driver needs to be skilled at having them move as one. Whenever people first begin to drive teams or pairs, and then I make them conscious of the longitudinal alignment problem, they end up with the idea that keeping horses longitudinally aligned is the biggest part of driving. It's very difficult for them. That's all they can think about, is keeping horses in longitudinal alignment. But what you find is, as the driver gets more practice and more experience at driving, that longitudinal alignment becomes second nature to you. It's something you never think about, but your horses will always be perfectly in longitudinal alignment if you get the proper skills when you're first learning how to drive. We got one horse out ahead of the other a little bit and learn to pick up the slack. Yeah, see, that's the only horse that felt the pressure when he pulled back on both reins. That's how these lines are designed. When this horse is out ahead an inch further than that horse, this is the only horse that feels any rein pressure. Just an inch. But it's more obvious when there's a foot of difference in the two. As you can see the slack hanging on the lines going to your horse that's to the rear. This is what I call the aggressive passive syndrome with horses. The horse in the lead tends to be aggressive. You can see the pressure going to the lines on him, and the horse that's behind is what I call in the slack. He's not really being driven. Here are two wooden 2-horse evener bars off a set of double trees, and you can picture the load being toward the top of the screen. One of the reasons that the aggressive horse wants to be out ahead is because it's easier for him to pull the load when he's ahead. You can see that when the aggressive horse, the one on the left, tries to get ahead, he lengthens his distance from his single tree pin hole to the center hole of the double tree, while he shortens the distance from the double tree pin hole to the single tree hole on the passive horse. The longer distance from the single tree pin hole on the aggressive horse and the center of the doubletree creates more leverage for the aggressive horse and makes the load easier for him to pull. We correct the longitudinal problem by pulling back evenly on both lines until the aggressive horse comes even with the passive horse. Then we release the pressure as a reward. Most beginner drivers, when they look at a horse being out ahead, they try to slow him down by pulling the line that's on that horse's side. If the left-hand horse is ahead, they pull their left line real hard, which only makes both horses turn to the left. One of the most common ways that teamsters deal with longitudinal alignment problem is that they'll asymmetrically shorten one stub line. Usually they'll shorten the line that goes to the aggressive horse. You should never do that because you tilt the bit on the aggressive horse to where he can no longer go straight down the road. His bit is forever crooked when you asymmetrically adjust the lines like that. So you can see the importance of, like with a flexible bit like this, you know, it can do a lot of different things. And it's easier to make it to where both horses have equal pressure. This Liverpool type bit is useful for affecting longitudinal alignment because you can fasten the lines into whatever leverage position is necessary to get the aggressive horse to yield to pressure. The lines here are hooked into the snaffle position. The further down the bit you hook in the lines, the more the horse feels the pressure from the driver's hands. You'll notice I only use buckle ends on driving lines. Many lines have snaps which hook on quickly, but also have a reputation for coming off when least expected. You might have noticed that I use a lot longer stub lines or coupling lines than what most people use, and there's a reason for that. You'll notice on these typical American-made lines that the coupling lines or stub lines are quite a bit shorter. You can see here what happens when one horse jumps ahead of the other. He pulls the stub line through the upper hamring on the other horse, and that can foul the line right there. It'll make it to where you lose your steering and stopping ability with that pair of horses. The stub lines are green and the draft lines are red in this picture. This illustrates what happens if the right-hand horse gets ahead of the left one by more than a foot or two. This sort of thing is an adjustment you have to be ready for if you're going to be a good teamster. You need to know how to adjust for the problem of having a long neck and a short neck horse beside each other. This may at first appear to be an asymmetrical line adjustment that we do here, but we do an equal thing to both lines. We move the stub line back that goes to the short-necked horse, and we move the stub line forward by an equal amount on the line that goes to the long-necked horse, so that this is truly still a symmetrical line adjustment that keeps the bits perpendicular to the line of travel. The short chain between the end of the double tree and the axle on the vehicle that you're pulling is called a stay chain. It's fairly standard to see them, and people use stay chains to try to correct longitudinal alignment problems. Some teamsters think it's a great deal to make the aggressive horse just pull the whole load, but I don't agree. Having the aggressive horse pull the entire load and the passive horse pull none of the load is not a very good way of correcting longitudinal alignment problems. The stay chains will make the double tree perpendicular to the tongue, but it'll do nothing about the problem of the aggressive horse being too hard on the bit. If you add too much weight to a horse that wants to be aggressive, you'll just aggravate the problem. It makes him try harder, and he doesn't need that. What he needs is to learn to ease off. This is called a tie-back rope. It goes from the belly band billet trace junction on one horse to the halter on the other horse, on the one that wants to get ahead. I use a tie-back rope on horses that just occasionally want to be ahead, like on colts that are being trained. For horses that have a chronic full-time problem of being too aggressive on the bit, being always the one that has to be in the lead, I like to use this thing that's called a buckback system to correct the problem. I fasten the buckback system to the inside trace or the single tree on the passive horse so that when the aggressive horse tries to get ahead, he's pulling the single tree back on the passive horse, and that thing of pulling the single tree back will restrain him back to where he's even with the other horse. If we're using Liverpool type bits on the horses, I would never fasten the buckback system into anything except the snaffle position. This buckback system has been a wonderful thing to alleviate the longitudinal alignment problems in particularly tough pairs of horses. If you're driving a green pair of horses that you don't know very well in a situation where you definitely don't need to have any problem, you can put a buckback system on both horses. That greatly improves the safety conditions. The third possible dimension to alignments that we haven't talked about yet is vertical alignment, how the two horses lined up height-wise. This is that dimension of alignment that most people seem to know quite a bit about, and most people are willing to pay a lot to achieve. But vertical alignment is probably the least important dimension of alignment as far as safety and comfort of the horses. Most vertical alignment considerations have only to do with cosmetics. We put the taller horse on the right side of the pair so that they look good when they're going down the road. Most roads are crowned higher on the left than they are on the right if you're on the right side of the road. So we put the taller horse on the right. We can also shorten or lengthen the breast straps on the harness so that the neck yoke is parallel to the ground.
You've learned a lot now about the mechanics of harnessing and hitching a pair of horses. But there's a lot more involved in being a good driver than just these mechanics. The driver of pairs and single horses needs to know how to start, stop, turn, and back in ways that keep the horses calm and responsive.
I see a lot of drivers who seem to think it's okay to let their horses take a run at heavy loads. And I had an old teamster friend of mine one time tell me that he thinks that one of the greater problems or one of the greater ills with your modern driver of horses is that they see no problem with letting a horse run up hills with a load or attack a load real vigorously when a load appears to be hooked down somewhere. And what he said to me was, he said a good teamster will control the steps of his horses, like he'll keep the horses to where they do not increase their ground speed as the load increases. So if you're going up a hill with your horse or pair of horses, then the important thing is to not increase your ground speed. The horse's energy may increase. You'll see his steps change due to the muscle he's putting into them. But if you do not let the ground speed increase, then the horse will be a lot calmer. Horses look calmer and act calmer when they're not in the habit of running up hills. The best way for the driver to have calm and safely driven horses is for the driver to control their steps. The surest way to lose calmness with horses is to be too slack or too hard on the reins at any given moment. If the grip you're using doesn't allow for rapid and smooth change of rein pressure, your horses will show that lack by their upset behavior. The comfort hold is the first of the 3 different grips that we teach at the workshop. This is probably one of the more common grips that people use on the reins, but it is also the weakest grip that you can use. If you open your hand and look at the rein going through it, you can see that there's no bend to the rein with this grip. Some people modify the comfort grip by splitting out their index finger or more, but all that does is weaken a grip that's already fairly weak. If you would progress through this line of thinking to its ultimate conclusion, you'd be driving on your pinky fingers. The way you get back to here is that you first give slack here, let go of your rein, and then you use what I call the crab technique to get up here where you need to be, and then you pick it up. Okay? That doesn't work on a real live horse. That thing of letting go and then crabbing up and then take a hold of it, because you let go of him while you're making your hand shift right there. There is need when you're driving. There is need for the driver to be capable of having 2 feet of scope, what I call scope, or 2 feet of difference between where your hand is in your lap and where your hand is out in front of you. You're playing with 2 feet right here. Okay? You need the ability to be from here to there just like that. The only way that I know of to do that is by being, first of all, in an English grip, and then second of all, to know how to work a full cross, which is something might be kind of new to you. Go from our English grip, watch the cans. I put the reins into one hand. I've got a full cross in this one hand right here. Okay, and then I can reach up 2 feet. I'll put a cross in up here, further up. And there I just went 2 feet further up. And I can do that lightning fast and not wiggle the cans. You'll be able to see that you can pull with all your strength as you do this. Or you can just hold this 12 ounces of pressure in each hand and not let that vary as you go quickly 2 feet up to a new grip. You can see when you open your hand on this kind of grip that the rein takes a double bend pathway that creates a lot of friction in your hand. It's okay to either have your pinky finger in the grip or split out of the grip. It doesn't matter. When you put the reins into one hand like this, make sure they cross in the middle like this so that you have turning ability and stopping ability all in that one hand as you reach for a different grip with the other hand. We're carrying a whip, and we're driving our national champion single combined driving horse. And I'm going to be driving like this. I'll have the both reins coming into my left hand, and if I want to make a right hand turn, I'll assist with my right. Turn to the right, I'll assist with my right hand. I'll assist with the trombone type of motion with my right hand. If I need to reach up here and pull a foot of rein back, I'll reach up about a foot. Now, if I just need my right rein, I'll just get a hold of it with my right hand right here. Pull it back. Pull it back. I can hold it as we go through the turn and get my assist hand out of here. When we straighten up to come out of the turn, I'll just let that rein slip out of my hand right there. And if I want to make a left hand turn, I'll reach in with the same trombone sort of a grip, and I'll get a hold of the rein right here, pull it back into the top of my hand like that, hook it with a finger, and hold it as we go through the turn. When we come out of the turn, I can just let it slip out, go back to how we were. Panic stop sort of a situation, I'll reach up in here and get a hold of the reins with that hand and this hand here. I'll pull back with both of them together. That's for a stop. There's a mild turn version of this. If we're just rounding the end of the arena, then if I want to turn to the right, I'll rotate my hand down. Did you see the right hand come up? Just bring my hand to my left side and rotate my knuckle down. And if I want to turn left, I'll bring my hand across my body and rotate my hand around the corner like that. I'm a believer in rhythmically clucking or kissing at a pair of horses or a single to get them to go instead of yelling at them or calling their names. If you yell at your horse to make it go, like yell "get up" or some such thing, then when people around the horses start yelling, your horses begin to get excited. Nor do I expect my horses to sort through normal conversation listening for someone to say, "walk on," to get them to go. If you ask for a slight turn, even an imperceptibly slight turn, as you start your team, they'll move off calmer and easier. Pulling the right rein turns your horses to the right, pulling the left turns them to the left, but there's some modification to that knowledge that you also need to know. As you turn, you need to learn that there's a turning rein and there's also a supporting rein, which is the opposite rein. If you only pull the turning rein, your horses might turn too sharp. If they turn too sharp, they will bend their body in the middle instead of keeping their body straight. If you're a person who only ever pulls one rein to turn, your horses will be constantly slamming into the tongue or the shafts. By the proper interplay of direct rein and supporting rein, you can work it so the horse will turn, but it'll keep its head in front of itself as it turns. A lot of times when driving in a circle or around a curve, you'll use very little rein that's a direct rein to initiate the turn, and you'll use quite a bit of supporting rein to hold the horse out of the turn so they don't turn too sharp. If you make a sharp turn as you hold the horse's head straight, then the horse will learn how to cross its feet as it turns. It's amazing how many driving horses are taught to pull hard on the reins. They're going with 20, 40, 60, 80, maybe 100 pounds of pressure on the lines, and that's not good and it's not safe. I like to teach my horses that zero pressure means that they're doing things just like I want them to do. And when I add a few ounces of pressure to the lines, that means that I expect a change. For this simple thing of teaching a horse to back up, I'll smoothly add pressure and wait until the horse releases that pressure by backing off of the bit and moving its feet back. When the horse moves, then I release the pressure.
You pleasure driving enthusiasts have been patiently waiting for us to get to this section. A lot of the dynamics you have already learned also apply to driving the single horse. Draft horse teamsters should keep watching because we are going to finish this section by putting a draft horse to a cart.
It's legal to put a pleasure driving harness on any breed of horse from miniature horse to draft horse. Here it is on a Morgan. I usually start harnessing by putting on the surcingle backstrap hip strap assembly. There are two options for pulling the load with a pleasure driving harness. You can either use a breast strap with traces, as you see on the main horse here, or the inset horse is wearing pleasure type collar and pleasure type hames. Pleasure type hames don't have that adjusting ratchet at the top. They don't have the riser above the ratchet with the ball on top, and also at the end of the leather traces on pleasure driving harness, there are no toggle chains. There's only slots in the end of the leather. I usually put the bridle on last because it's a delicate piece of harness that is easily abused on a horse's head. This pleasure driving bridle has an overcheck. Many of them have a side check or no check device at all. After we get the reins on, I'll use this method to do up the reins on the back strap so that they're handy and they pull off real easy when I'm ready for them. I adjust the breast strap up as high as I can make it without it interfering with the neck on the horse. The saddle goes back to the base of the withers. The girth doesn't have to be real tight on a pleasure driving horse. In fact, we leave it sort of loose for a reason. We'll show you that here in a little bit. The saddle needs to be able to shift from side to side pretty easily. You'll notice that these up tugs on the breechin pass easily through the back strap on a pleasure type harness. This is the reason that we leave the surcingle rather loose, and the reason that the up tugs on the breechin pass freely through the back strap on a pleasure driving harness is because of side hills. You can see on this horse coming straight at us that the horse is plumb, but the vehicle behind it is tilted. If you made the girth tight, then it would be twisting the horse's body. We adjust the back strap to where we just take the slack out of it. Many pleasure driving enthusiasts don't use an overcheck at all because some people use an overcheck that's way too short, making the horses uncomfortable. I like using an overcheck because they're a great safety device to keep a horse from kicking a vehicle. But I adjust my overchecks to where the horse won't feel it until he begins to get his head below what's normal and comfortable for him. Pleasure driving people call this subject putting to. Draft horse people would call it hitching. Two-wheeled vehicles are called carts, and four-wheeled pleasure driving vehicles are properly called carriages. Shaft tips are slung through the tug loops. One person alone can put to like this. We bring the shafts forward high over the horse's rump so we don't make a mistake of poking the horse with the shafts in a sensitive area. It's okay if you need to have your shaft tips back of the shoulder somewhat, but it's never okay to put the shaft tips forward of the shoulder because they'd be catching on things and run the danger of a horse bumping his face on the shaft tips. We pull the traces down and attach them to the trace extenders on this long shafted vehicle. We adjust the traces so that when the vehicle is in draft, the shafts are even with the front end of the horse. Next, we attach the holdbacks. We wrap forward of the footman's loop on the bottom of the shaft and only around the shaft. Then we pick up the first wrap and poke the end of the strap under it on the way back to the buckle. When properly done, the holdback strap encompasses the trace but does not wrap around it. We adjust the breechin with the holdback strap, and we do that by putting the vehicle in the draft and then checking to see that there's a hand width of space in the breechin. There's people with real tiny hands and people with real big hands. There's real small horses and extremely big horses. So you'll have to figure out what's best when you apply your hand in the breechin like that. On a real tiny horse, I would just put a finger or two in. On a really big horse, I'd put my hand in, but I would leave it sort of a loose fit. Here's how we apply shaft wraps to the shafts. You'll notice that we figure 8 around both sides of the tug loop. There's no need to make the shaft wrap strap any tighter than the girth is. The trace is not tied down in any way by the shaft wraps. Show ring driving people will tighten their girth pretty snug, and they'll also snug up their shaft wraps because that's how they're pulling the load and stopping the load. They have no britching on their harness to stop their light loads on level ground, nor do they use the breast strap. They'll have one on there, but it'll be adjusted to where it's not functional. They believe that breast straps inhibit shoulder motion too much. This is more of a carriage type harness with a tab of leather coming off the bottom of the tug loop. The tug loops on this sort of harness are held down by a short strap with a buckle on each end of it that is attached to the girth. The rest of the putting to with this sort of harness is the same as it is with a shaft wrap type harness. These types of vehicles have single trees on them to allow for shoulder motion on the horse. We take the vehicle off of a single pleasure driving horse by doing things in reverse order of how we put to. On a green horse, I would employ a second person to help me, and I'd put them on the other side of the horse. We would undo each piece of harness together. It's really pretty simple to put a draft horse harness into a pleasure driving vehicle like this. We simply put the shaft hips through the loop that's in the market tug. We add pleasure driving type holdbacks off a pleasure driving harness to the rings in the end of the britching on this draft horse harness. Putting to this way is then quite similar to using a carriage type pleasure driving harness.
If you get into a wreck with your saddle horse, you are most likely the only one that will get hurt. If, on the other hand, you have a wreck with a driving horse, not only are you endangered, but also your horse, your passengers, and the people and things in front of your horse.
Well, there was one day when old Stumpy had to go to town. He figured, well, he'd take the farm wagon and the horses into town and pick up some grain. So he come driving into town and up to the granary there. And then walking down the sidewalk was this very fine-looking young lady. Oh, a fine-looking young lady. Oh, golden hair hanging down, nice fur coat. Old Stumpy, of course, he figures himself a ladies' man. Yeah. Well, he straightens himself off, dusts a little dust off. He climbs down off the wagon. He walks up to the young lady and says, "How'd you do, ma'am?" Well, she takes about 2 steps backwards looking at him. And she says, "Hello." Then she sees the horse and says, "Oh, look at the fine horses. Can I pet the horses?" Old Stumpy says, Why, sure, ma'am. Step right up there." Well, she steps up and she pets the horses and gets a little dirt on her hands and, nice horsey, nice horsey. The lady turns to old Stumpy and says, would you take a picture of me and the horses, please? I got my camera right here. The old Stumpy says, "Well, sure. Well, I tell you what. Why don't you climb right up here in the seat and we'll get a picture of you driving the horses." She said, "Oh, that'd be fine." So he helps her up in the wagon. She gets up there and she's a holding on to the lines. Now, she's holding on to them real dainty like about like this, because they're a little dirty, you understand. Well, old Stumpy, he gets back, aims the camera, squeezes down, the camera goes click, flash. Well, now you understand. These horses don't take kindly to that flash. Oh, boy, eyeballs get big, ears go back, and they take off. There's the lady hanging onto the lines like this. Down the road he went. Boy, her hair was streaming back in her, and the fur coat was flopping in the breeze when I saw him disappearing around the corner there. Yeah, he was.
If you want to be safe when driving, the thing to do is get horses with good reputations and drive them so that they stay calm. To keep your horses calm, you first need to drive them so that lateral and longitudinal alignments are observed all of the time you are driving. Being out of alignment makes horses act poorly. Don't drive horses that are pulling on the line. If a horse is confident at pulling on the lines, he might think he can just pull a little harder if he wants to leave. Just as sure as you can teach a horse to go with 50 pounds of pressure on the lines, you could also teach him to not pull at all and to respond to a couple of ounces of pressure. Horses calm down and think better if you're not pulling on their mouths. Know that noise, especially noise that follows along behind, can be very frightening to horses. You can do like some people do and try to keep everything quiet around your horses all of the time, or you can carefully train or purchase horses that have been trained to accept noise and keep your horses that way. I exercise my trained horses on a sled mostly because sleds make a lot of noise, especially on gravel roads. If my horses can tune out the sound of steel runners on gravel, I know they'll be okay with most any other kind of noise. Get the right load. If your loads are too light, you might start having problems with your horses getting too playful. If the loads are too heavy, you might give your horses that serious mental illness that is called balky. Balky horses have a fear of pulling that is characterized by dangerous plunging forward, complete refusal to move, and variations of those two themes. Horses work best when given a steady course of moderate loads. I rest horses every 5 minutes for a minute or so when I'm working until I'm sure they aren't going to get their respiration rate faster than their heart rate. 60 breaths per minute is a horse that's being worked pretty hard. Be a driver who keeps hold of the lines or reins. It's when people drop their lines or set their lines down that many wrecks happen. I always buckle or tie my lines together on the ends so I still have them if I drop one. Along with having good horses and working them so they stay that way, don't cut corners by using junk harness or junk vehicles. It's better to walk than to be having a wreck because of having something break. Horses work best in circular pathways. If your idea of fun is to drive in and out of your 100-yard long lane, you'd better get a go-kart. Horses seem to learn to be responsive most quickly when the driver can ask for and get perfect circles. Feed appropriately. If your horse isn't working every day, don't feed him as if he is, unless you like to see dangerous, exuberant behavior. I use a kick strap on every horse that I drive in a cart. When used properly, it prevents the horse from getting his hind end in the air. Horses that can't get their hind ends off the ground can't kick the vehicle. We adjust a kick strap so that the slack is just going out of each side as the opposite leg touches the opposite shaft. There are two opposing interests on a horse in shafts that is wearing a kick strap. The driver and passengers would like to hold the horse's hind end down with the kick strap. An exuberant horse might occasionally try to kick up, but he can't because he's been given a short lever to lift what the other interest is holding down with a long lever. From the pivot point of this whole operation, which is the tug loop, the horse lifts up when trying to kick with about 3 feet of lever. The driver and passengers add their weight to the weight of the cart on the end of the lever, which is the shafts, to hold the horse's hind end down. Most pleasure driving vehicle shafts are about 7 feet long for standard size horses. Pleasure driving traces, of course, match that length. This is a breaking cart, and the shafts are about 1 foot longer than usual. With a long shafted vehicle like the one shown here, the driver and passengers enjoy a high degree of safety when using a kick strap. When you see a single horse pulling a carriage well, and when you see a team of horses or a big hitch of horses pulling a wagon real well, if you only count the horses as being the well-trained members of that unit, you're counting it wrong. A well-educated driver and good horses go together like a conductor with a symphony orchestra go together to make great performances. There is no other experience like driving horses and doing it well. Anyone can twist a throttle or step on the gas pedal. It takes a lot more up here and in your heart to get good performance out of horses. This video is a great place to start your education about driving. We also offer draft and driving horse workshops here at the farm. Those that need to learn by seeing and hearing and feeling all these things on real live horses, you should come to a workshop, and you can have all your questions answered to your heart's content if you just show up here for a workshop. I also have a number of articles that offer a little more depth and a little different detail than what you've seen here on this video that cover subjects such as lateral alignment, longitudinal alignment, safety devices, and some of my thoughts on how people train horses nowadays. We also have a website that is at bowersfarm.com. We hope you learned a few things that will make a big difference in how well you drive horses. If you're a better driver, your horses will appreciate you more. I'd like to thank my partners, Larry Helberg and Marlon Stewart, for putting in all those long hours in the studio. There's a lot more work goes into a video like this than I ever imagined. We ask that you not copy this video. That would be morally as well as legally wrong. Thank you for listening.